Okay, so in addition to the interface intro from the other tutorial set, I just wanted to go over a few other things that I thought is important to know when setting up your scene in Maya. So this is Maya 2019 just opened. Let's go to our settings and preferences. Go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, and Preferences. And the important things here we want to go to is to the settings, and we want to work with the up axis as Z. By default, it's set to Y, and that's because that's for the animation industry. Y is the direction of the camera, and so that's why that's considered the up axis. And then we want to go to units, inches, and so this way, when we import stuff that we've exported out of Rhino as inches, everything matches, so we won't get any kind of weird things. The other thing to do is in undo, we want to turn that on and make sure it's set to infinite. By default, it's either off or set to finite, and so we want to fix that. The other one is in Files, Projects. Let's enable autosave. And I think it still works for the student evaluation version. But so yeah, you want to turn that on, and you want to make sure that you frequently save your file. And then there's other things to do here too, but we don't need to get into that right now. Okay, so that's that. Another thing that's really useful to know here is in the modify setting, you have these kind of transform tools, as well as, no, I guess that's what we need to know here. And so what that does is, let's say I'm going to create a cube, and I'm going to move this cube over there, and you'll see in my channel box that it's showing me its position in relationship to the world origin, right? But so let's say that this is its fixed location in my scene, and I want to be able to use that to measure new things off of it. So I want this to be at 0, 0, 0, right? So what I can do is go to Modify and freeze the transformation. So let's just open up the options for this. We want to freeze all of these, and so if I do that, this will reset it, right? So now that's 0, 0. So now this is its new kind of origin. And so sometimes this becomes really, really helpful. Another thing that's helpful actually is that we can add any tools that, let's say, if we're working in poly modeling, right? We can add buttons or tools to this shelf if we want. And so to do that is we go to, let's say I want to add freeze transformations. We hover over it. I think it's Control Shift and then click, and then you'll see freeze transformation shows up there, right? Another really useful thing is to know and to do is that, see how the our gumball is right now is at the center, which is a good space, but we can also move that. And so if I hit D, now I can move the gumball, right? If I let go, now this is where my pivot is, right? So if I rotate, so which is here. So another thing he didn't go over is there's hotkeys for these. So Q is select. Oh yeah, this says it right here. That's great. Where is it? Move tool is W, and then rotate is E, and scale is R. So they're right next to each other on the keyboard. But so if I went to rotate, then that's my center pivot for rotate, right? So let's just say I wanted to get that back in the center. Well, what I can do is go to Modify, Center Pivot. And so I'm going to throw that on my shelf, and then I can just click it and it recenters it. Okay, another thing that's really useful is that, really important to know in Maya is that by default, see this little icon up here? This is construction history. Right now it's on. By default, it's on. And what that means is that anything I do to this thing, it keeps a log of its history, its construction history. So that means that if I change things, it'll update those things, right? So for example, I'm going to go into component mode, and let's select this face, and I'm going to extrude it here. I'm going to just pull that out, scale that, right? And so I've got all this stuff. So now, if I, let's say, go to the attribute editor, which is right here, that operation is recorded. So if I go to poly extrude face, right, this is that that history, right? So I can update that. I can change the divisions of that new thing. This is the local direction, is the extrusion distance. So I can update that here. Oh no, it didn't. Oh no, sorry. Don't do that. Sorry, it's this one. Local translate. So if I went, 1.8 or whatever, I can update that there, right? Keep faces together. If I turn that off, oh, in this case, I only did one, so it won't do it. But so this is not per face, this is per operation. So if I did that operation with multiple faces selected, then all of those faces would be stored in this one tab. So it's an operation, not a component history. So let's say I didn't want this history anymore because history takes up memory, CPU power, right? So if I knew I wasn't going to need to update or change this, I can go to Edit, Delete by Type, History, right? And so we got to make sure that there's delete all by type. If I went all by type history, it deletes the history of the entire scene. So typically you don't want to do that. You want to control it by object. So in this case, I only have one thing selected. So if I do that, you'll see that it resets this. So I no longer have the option to update any of that stuff, right? And so that's another good thing to have as we're doing things. In our case, we're not going to really probably have to use that, but if you're going to work in Maya after this, it's a good thing to know and to use. And that's another good thing to throw on our shelf. So, okay, I think there was another one here. Why isn't my wireframe on? There we go. Let me see if there was something else here. No, maybe that was it. Okay, well, if there's no, well, I'll come to it later. But that's another. This is just basically another set of stuff to know to set up your workspace. Oh no, I know what it was. It's going over layers and outliner. So in Rhino, right, there's basically you have a layer manager, and that's where you control, you organize your file and all of your objects on there. But so what's nice about Maya is that you have more specific control over objects. So if we look in this layer tab right here, that we don't even have a layer, right? And so this isn't even on a layer. And so if we wanted to throw it on a layer, we would create one there, and then add selected objects. And then we can give this a color. So you'll see it updates it. And this is to make it visible. V is visible. And P, I forgot what P was. What is that there? Parent or something, I forgot. This is transparent versus referenced. So when these are on, I can't grab it, right? But I can use it to snap to, I can use it to visual. So if I just need it, it's basically locking it, right? And then template is locking it, but making it transparent, or like an X-ray or wireframe. Okay, I forgot what P was for. But okay, so this is the layer manager, but this is actually the least important. So it's actually better to have fewer layers. So what I typically do is I organize my layers on general geometry things. So I might say I might have a layer of like polygons or a certain class of polygons. versus curves or surfaces. So I try to keep this minimal just to control larger groups of things. The real thing to control your objects is the outliner. And so here, everything shows up, right? And so every object, so let's just say, I'm going to duplicate this, Control D, duplicate, Control D, so you'll see every object is showing up here, right? And Maya really works with a parent-child relationship, right? And so right now, if I notice, so I also have my cameras in here, right? So I can click, they're hidden. So if you see they're grayed out, they're hidden. And so if I Control H is to hide, and so it's gone, right? And so it shows up here that, oh, this polycube 1 is now it's grayed out, it's hidden. If I select it and go Shift P, oops, where is it? Oh, no, Shift H, sorry. Shift H, it'll bring it back, right? So this is a really efficient way to control individual objects. But let's say I wanted to group these together, right? So I can select them here, or I can select them here, and I can Control G. So now they're in a group. So if I expand that, this group, right, this heading, this is not an actual object, it just represents all of these. So this is one way. So now if I select the group has its own origin, which is the world XY, right? So now I can take the group and center pivot it on this group of objects and move it from there, right? And if I wanted to ungroup that, where is it? Does it show up here? I'm sure there's a short key. Where is it? Ungroup. Oh, there isn't a keyboard shortcut. That sucks. Oh wait, no, I know what I can do. Control G, group. I believe if I middle mouse and drag, there you go, it releases it. So selecting them, middle mouse dragging out, but then if you notice, the group representative is still there, but this is not an object, it's nothing. So we would just delete that. But I can also, if I were to select these two, and then this one, last one, and hit P, now it's parented, meaning that polycube 1, the middle one, see how if I select that, even though I'm in object mode, it's selecting all of these because that's the parent and these are the children, right? So just selecting that one, that's like the, the parent of the group is moving all of them, right? And so back up here in this kind of status line, or not status line, but I forgot what this is called, but all the different settings or options here. These three icons represent selecting by hierarchy and combinations, so that's what this is, right? So now, if I'm on this with this on, and I select any one of these, it's selecting, if it's part of a group, it's selecting all of them, right? If I'm on object, now I can only select the objects, but because this is the parent, it will select all of them. And then component mode is just that. So if I select that, now I'm in, oops. Now I'm in component mode, right? So I can go faces, and so these right here just tells me which components I can select. So right now I can select vertices. This is UVs, I believe. Oh no, I don't need that. So that's vertices. This is edges, right? So if you hover over it, you'll see faces. These are the ones we work with the most. I did some weird command accidentally before, but another way to do this is, as you said, right-click, and then you'll see edge, vertex, face, right? Or just go back to object mode. Okay, so hopefully this should be helpful. And then again, if I wanted to take this out of parent, I think it's Shift P. Oh, there was some key command here. Where is it? unparent, Shift P. Yeah, it shouldn't be that. Oh, I have to do this. And then Shift P, and then it'll release it. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense.